Hello, my name is Michaela Mercer, and I am doing my research presentation on an analysis of post-operative behavior of personality in organ recipient patients. Uh-oh. Give me 1 second. So first, we're going to talk about the key concept of what we actually want to gain knowledge over and what we want to do and make sure that we know by the end of this presentation. So the key concept is to show how organ transplant is, how the process is actually really rigorous and not just an everyday regular surgery. And also, we're going to take the information about background knowledge and apply it to the article to do a personal analysis on how a transplant can possibly cause an identity disruption, like a body integrity and interconnectedness. So we're going to do a little background information on organ transplant, something very brief. We just know that organ transplantation is the surgical removal of healthy organs from one person to another, and the transplantation is to another person whose organ has failed or injured. So you have to actually have your organs probably been failing, or another organ is actually failing to make another organ fail. So you can actually have a double transplant, which they mostly do those in kidneys and pancreas and heart and lung. But the surgery overall carry out risks and drawbacks such as like organ rejection, because you have to pay attention to close characteristics as in like blood type, size, and timing. Some blood type, you have to have the same blood type as the actual donor that's donating the organ, and you also, it has to be a certain size. You can't put a 7-year-old's heart inside of a 45-year-old man because the heart is not mature, or you can't have a 45-year-old man heart going to a 7-year-old because the heart is too big for the actual chest cavity. And timing also is very important. But also, the organ transplant normally happen in kidney, pancreas, liver, heart, and lung. And those are just the most common is kidney, and the least common is intestines. But depending on what organ is needed, organs are like matched using like the characters that we just talked about, and also like how long somebody's been on the waiting list, how sick they are, and the distance between the donor and the potential recipient. So time, like I said, timing is one of those characteristics. Timing is very critical in a transplant because doctors usually drop the organ inside of a plastic bag on ice, just so to be sure that the actual organ is not deteriorating, because lungs do soon stop breathing, and hearts soon stop beating. So they have to preserve the organ somehow to get it to the next person. And doctors maybe only have 10 hours to get it from the donor to the recipient. And you have to deal with travel delays and different like that. This right here is like a little brief video just to see how your heart actually beats. This is when it's outside the body, inside of a machine. So that's just one of the tools that many doctors use to try to preserve. But it's also a company called Andover company known as Transmedic came up with a system known as Organ Care System. It's a portable device that actually circulates the blood through the lungs or heart and gives oxygen through like the lobes, so the lungs can breathe outside of the body, or the heart can beat outside the body. But the device is not FDA approved, so it's still going on a critical clinical testing to be sure that this is something that we can use to probably preserve more lives and help more people out. This is just an overview of comparing the people waiting to get a transplant and the people who are actually getting a transplant. So you can see that it's approximately around 80,000 are waiting, and only 25,000 is actually getting a transplant. That's over 60% that is still waiting, that's still sick, that's still dealing with failing organs. And just think about the death rate, how the death rate like increases because that we do not have enough organs, or a lot of people are not organ donors. So my prior research paper is called Heart Transplant Identity Disruption, Bodily Integrity and Interconnectedness, and it was presented by these authors. Basically, the writers addressed the cardiac transplantation addressed the cardiac transplantation, which is heart transplantation, pressing new questions about how patients incorporate a heart transplant into their sense of self and how it impacts their actual personal identity. And they use like visual methodology and recorded 25 semi-structural interviews to gain their data. So the hypothesis is does identity and its disruption tap into a long tradition of physiological inquiry around itself? So does your personality of another person actually come in and disrupts into your body because you have their organ and turn into a psychological thing, or is it actually physical? So they conducted the experiment by using, like I said before, visual methodology, which is like visual studies. So visual methodology is like a distinct body of like how they move and their gestures, or how they sit, how do they answer the question, just their whole image of both mind and body, and how in communication, and make sure that it was effective verbally. And the research was conducted in a single setting within a large academic health center in Canada. It's one of the largest transplant programs in the country, and it follows global organ donation transplant guidelines, which are really strict to be sure that everybody's getting taken care of who's waiting on the waiting list. And the participants were offered the opportunity to be interviewed in their home or in a quiet room in a hospital away from the clinical setting. The choice of location was actually there. So 17 chose to be in their homes and 8 chose to be in the hospital. And while they were videotaping, each video ranged from 30 minutes to 2.5 hours. And all interviewers, participants spoke openly and friendly. It often required a little prompting in a quiet room, just to make sure to keep them comfortable. So it was given a survey, and this is these are actual questions of the survey. It's saying, well, but in the first phase of the data analysis, they used transcripts and videotapes were simultaneously reviewed and time log, noting like key moments. And key moments are events that are embodied responses, such as like I said before, like gestures or locate area of difficulty, or like turning their legs, biting their lip, picking up their ear, just to know their whole body language. But in the final phase of the data analysis, the researchers actually came together with all the transcripts and video recording, and a certain team met together to develop like a broad theme and common ground of textual and audiovisual data so they can all analyze it across the board. And they were discussed and debated by them, and they both reached consensus before they broke up into different categories to actually focus on their actual specialty. But the donor survey questions were, has having a new heart changed the way you think about your body? And could you give an example? Has having a heart transplant changed how you feel about yourself as a person? And could you tell me more about that? And some people, this was an optional question. Some people say that you became a different person after you received a heart transplant. What is your opinion? So we gave them some pretty open questions just to give their feel on how they felt like being interviewed about this certain situation. But overall, identity disruption manifesting as distress occurs frequently after heart transplant, regardless of how patients receive their transplant heart to their donor. It's just the reality of the transplant surgery is what is cut from one body and grafted to another is like a living organ. So the current approaches they took was to inform consent processes to need to be revisited and see how the patients or the donors or the recipients are being treated, so they can gain more information to actually get to identify the identity disruption. But with this information I was given, I conducted actual data analysis in our studio with the numeric data. And the things that I went and found was like the mean and median, standard deviation, summary of each variable. I did a t-test, a histogram, a box plot, a scatter plot, and a bar graph. Back it up. But with those are just these. Well, these are just the tests that I ran, so I can just overall get my own statistical data and look at it and make applications from it. So first, I had to upload the data into RStudio, and then I had to run data and create a data frame. Data frame is like a the way data is set up in RStudio. I think I actually have a picture of it. Yeah. So this right here is actually a Excel right here. So I had to save it and change the actual document from an Excel spreadsheet to a text. So I can actually input it inside of RStudio and run the test. So I had to manually do it. So next I ran the means of all. I ran it with my different variable. I ran it with all genders with the male and female included, and I got 131.81. I did individual mean and male. You see that female is higher. Then I did it with median with all variables, all genders, male and female. And then I did a summary of like basically all in caps of mean, median, the minimum, the max, all this combined basically. I actually did this one first, and you can see that information is right here. Then I completed a t-test on each of my variables. This is all genders, this is male, and this is female. And you can see that the T equals 4.29 for female. And this, I'm just doing an example, and that the alternative hypothesis, which is mean the true mean is not equal to 0, and that the 95% confidence interval was 95.49. And you also see that it's getting the means right here. These are called histograms. So I wish I could have got them bigger on the slide, but this is just another graph. I'm really good with visuals where I can it's better for me to visualize what's actually going on to make comparisons between the data. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say histogram. This is box plot. Excuse me, these are box plot. But these are histograms, more like kind of like a bar graph, but not really a bar graph, but histograms, this is the female, male, and all gender. Also completed a scatter plot. This is female, this is male, and this is all gender. You can see where both of these, if you lay over this one, you definitely would get that one. I did a bar plot. This is female, this is male, this is all gender. So from that data, I wish I did a separate video on the different, actually running the data, which is actually inserted in the box below. But the data has a variety of implications. The data is comparing the heart transplants from the past 5 years in gender and age, but my main focus was to focus on gender because I didn't want to really go into age because it only gives me a range and not a specific age. And it's hard to really, that's not in detailed data, and I like in detailed data. And it showed that females higher in age had needed a transplant rather than males. My free response, I admire the researchers for the administrating simple data for simple observations that anybody could have looked at the data and understood. And also like that they provided us to transfer the data from videograph to statistical data. But I do disagree on only providing a small number of participants, even though you can have a good number, or like a nice pool of people, but not too small, so you can actually get like really in detailed data. The further study, I would just add more variables as in actual ages, like their actual age, not ranges. I would follow up on other participants to conduct research on like their mental state and participants or who were interviewed. Now, actually, if they were kids, I would like to ask the parents on them to participate in the health screening to gain more information on the medical history of the family. These are my background references, and I'd like to thank you for watching my video. I had a wonderful time in this class. I had a wonderful time doing this research. I actually am really interested in genomics and bioinformatics. But just look at the box below, see the video where I did the data analysis, and just have a great night.